The global South strikes hard, and we could even say that it declares war on the West. The East declares war on the West. And what's happening right now in China is far from being just any summit. It's really not just laying the foundations for the new multipolar world order, but it's also sending us a very clear message that the world will never be the same. And we're going to see this point by point in just a moment, because believe me, I'm not just saying this for the sake of it. On one hand, we have an event that is global in every sense, and it also has global consequences in every sense. On the other hand, we have Donald Trump, whose health is just fine, don't worry, despite what much of the international press says. How little? And the truth is, the rumors about Donald Trump's condition are not calming down at all. In fact, right now it seems that they have cordoned off the Walter Reed Hospital in the United States, where the most important figures are treated, including the country's presidents. This leaves more questions than answers. That said, the White House assures that the president is in perfect health and that he will be making a series of key statements. Some say that even over the Pentagon tonight at 8 post-meridian, specifically Spain Peninsular time, tomorrow we will most likely discuss this matter among others. But if you want to find out the results of these statements before anyone else, I welcome you to my Telegram channel. Remember Liu Sivaya or Liu Sivaya, just like my other social networks. Meanwhile, while the United States, the master, at least of the Western side, the Western part of the world, is not exactly going through its best moments, the exact opposite is happening with the Global South. And this summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which took place in China on August 31 and September 1. In addition, tomorrow a military parade of biblical proportions will take place, especially in terms of China, because this is the first clue and the first peculiarity. It's not something typical of Eastern culture itself. We're not just talking about China anymore, organizing those kinds of military parades, showing off military power. In fact, they've always been known, especially in China, for a rather subtle diplomacy. Yes, that's true, sometimes with a little joke or a bit of sarcasm here and there. However, they don't act the same way, nor do they express themselves about foreign policy matters like, for example, the Russian Federation does. However, tomorrow we will witness not just a military parade, nor just a military parade. A military parade that will represent the victory of China and Russia in World War II. Here, everything, absolutely everything, is full of symbolism, and really, everything that has happened these days in China is of utmost importance, and it is ultimately a declaration of war against the West, and above all against the international order established by that same West against Western values. If you will, now understanding this 2030 agenda, everything we are including under the term globalist elites, if you will. Now let's go step by step. Why and what statements exactly make this summit a truly important, fundamental event? I would even say on an international level, so you can understand the magnitude not only of the event, but of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization itself. Some key points. First of all, the countries have 10 member states, which represent no less than 4% of the world's population. Secondly, if we look at economic terms, for example, gross domestic product at purchasing power parity, in the list of the four most important, namely China, the United States, India, and Russia, we find three members of this organization, of course, China, India, and Russia. This already gives us an idea that, secondly, the most important ones are not just one, but also two main points. First of all, the rules on which this new multipolar world order will be based, and secondly, it has already become obvious that it is absolutely necessary to review them. And the countries that attended the summit have indeed agreed on this need, because that organization was originally designed for a rather bipolar world order. Now we are talking about at least four main powers: China, India, the United States, and Russia. Because in the eyes of the whole world, I think it's obvious that neither France nor Germany nor the United Kingdom have the power and international standing they used to have. And the United Nations also, designed for the winners of World War II, which the West decided would be those countries. In this sense, we return to this parade that comes to celebrate that victory. But not by the United States nor by the European powers, but by the Russian Federation and by China, which are going to be the most important pillars, I would say, of this new multipolar world order. In this sense, the leader of China offers us a concept that I think will become stronger and stronger: global governance. And here I have written down the 5 main points of it for you. Sovereign equality is understood as the equality of nations within that global governance. Compliance with the principles of international law. Are we heading toward a new multilateralism? I also think it's understood as multipolarity, the defense of a people-oriented approach, and finally a focus on real action. These 5 points, I think they're not only the ones that will represent the new global structure in every sense and meaning, because from here on, all the international institutions we know will necessarily have to be reviewed and examined thoroughly to respond to the new demands of the international stage, where there are more and more important players, and those who used to be important before, like for example the United States. In the European Union, they are really having less and less power and therefore less importance. And this makes it necessary that at a certain point, the rules of the game are actually changed like never before. Or rather, that they adapt to the reality we are living as humanity, as of today. I believe there are 5 pillars that are not only important, but also quite fair. We would all like, at least in theory, as it looks on paper, for them to be applied within the new multipolar world order. But above all, what we're experiencing with this staging, tomorrow we're going to see it absolutely spectacular. With these statements, which are not at all typical of Chile, but rather of China, because it is a country, I repeat, with a rather timid and modest diplomacy. Well, sensible, irrational, or rather, yes. However, now it implies, it seems that the global south has not only risen, but is now strong enough. Not only to present its vision of the world, but it is seen and felt as powerful, and let's say, with enough weight for those principles it puts forward to be supported globally. That is, I think it is rightly known, rightly and with enough reason to actually redraw the international institutional map, to which we have been accustomed until now. And this, of course, is just a small part of everything that is coming. Because, among other things, the creation of their own bank has also been discussed, which is what has Donald Trump extremely worried. And as context, just to add the final details, this is happening right at the moment when that same Donald Trump announced secondary sanctions. And he had a sort of international clash with India, which sided with the Russian Federation by purchasing energy resources from that country, leaving Donald Trump practically isolated. And what's the most descriptive image of what's happening now at the international level? Well, two images actually, I think they are the following. On one hand, that Russian Federation absolutely isolated, or in other words, the global South and its representatives, who in absolute terms make up 40% of humanity. Secondly, facing them, the West, supposedly more united than ever, whose leaders are accompanied, if anything, only by themselves. And that's it. And now I ask you, which side do you think is going to end up winning this battle? Because here, really, when we're talking about NATO's war against the Russian Federation and what's happening on a global level right now, we're really not talking about local conflicts, not even clashes, and even more so on an international level. We're talking about a kind of war of civilizations, and above all, about models for organizing the world and about values that have now come into absolute conflict. Which side are you betting on? And which one do you think will end up being the winner?